What's going on, Illumineers, and welcome back into the Madhouse. And Set Champs is an exciting time because I get to do some of my favorite videos, and those being that I get to highlight and shout out some players that go into their locals and really do phenomenal jobs, whether it's their first set champs, their fourth set champs, whatever it may be. So these videos that I'm going to be doing each week are highlighting some decks that took first and second at their set champs. We're going to talk about some of the spice, some of their matchups, things like that, in hopes that maybe you see something you like. Maybe you've been really doubting that your deck can do well, and then you see that it's winning other set champs. So for everybody, set champs is an exciting time, but I really love it because I get to look at all these awesome decks out there with all this great spicy stuff, and then I get to talk about it. So if you do really well and you get that first or second, shoot me a message on my Discord, tag me on Facebook, whatever it is, and I'll try and put you in my next video. Like I said, I'll be doing one each weekend, hopefully before Fridays, and let's talk about what you guys are running. With that being said, let's jump into it and let's look at our first deck. And before we do, let me hide my mug over here. Get it out of the way. There we go. All right, so coming up first, we have Vince taking the back-to-back Set Champs champion mat at Safari Zone Collectibles in Smyrna, Delaware. And of course, he's coming in running red-blue because that's his specialty. And this one, though, he came in knowing the local meta and ready to beat it up, and he did. He went in top seed and was able to just win the whole thing. And looking at it, though, it is a spicy list. Right off, we see Super Goofy, which is really good into the aggro matchups, really good into just a lot of different things we have in the meta. Maybe they feel against Purple Steel, they're feeling really good, so they exert their Calhoun. So now you Vitalosphere and Goofy, the Calhoun. Just lots of different possibilities with that Goofy, but mainly they're helping the aggro matchup. Next up, we see the Prince John. And the Prince John is something that we talked about for NA Continentals. There was a red-blue list that was running Prince John, and I was a little confused about why it was worth the 2 slots, and people explained, well, it's good draw power. Because Hiram against the red-purple match normally just gets blown up immediately, but Prince John's a little bit harder to deal with, so you're guaranteed to get some of that draw off of Popsicle, which is really useful. The other thing that we're seeing is that Prince John works really well with Poison Apple. And this was the main reason that Vince wanted to run Prince John, because of this Poison Apple Spice card. And if you've never seen it, like I never had, it is you banish this item and pay 1 ink. You get to exert a chosen character, and if it's a princess, you can banish chosen character. So this is really important because red-blue's hardest matchup is typically hyper aggro. You don't see a lot of it, but in our local meta, we normally see a lot of aggro decks. So what happens is that Vince can get down Prince John, he can get down Poisoned Apple, and then he can clear the opponent's board, but a lot of the time Hyper Aggro will get to that 17, 18 ink line, and then Red-Blue eventually just runs out of ways to clear the opponent's board, and they're finally able to quest out that last 2 or 3 lore. But with Poison Apple, he can lay that down, banish the item to exert the chosen character, hit them, and then bring it back with Prince John. And this works really, really well with something like Maui Half Shark, where now a lot of people won't exert their characters because they don't want Half Shark to bring back all these phenomenal actions. But with Poison Apple, it doesn't matter. You can exert their character anyways, Maui still gets to hit them, and then to make matters even worse, they can use Go the Distance, which Go the Distance is you draw a card, but also you can ready chosen character. So they can't quest, but they can still challenge, they can still sing. So Vince is able to come in here and he's able to use a Poison Apple to ready a character. Then he's able to hit them with Maui Half Shark to bring back something like a Pirate's Life, or How Far I'll Go. And then he can use Go the Distance to then sing a Pirate's Life, or to sing How Far I'll Go. And so he got to draw a card here, he draws a card here, he gains 3 lore off of Pirate's Life, and the aggro deck loses 2 lore. Like this wombo combo here of Prince John, Half Shark, Poisoned Apple, and Go the Distance is just insane. And if you don't know it's coming, which I don't think I've ever seen Poison Apple played, then you're not going to be prepared for it. There's really nothing you can do to prepare for it unless you have item removal, and you can remove Prince John before you can exert. So just a really spicy, really cool tech into an aggro lineup. And then of course we have the 3 McDuck Manners that's really good into red purple, and it's really good into the mirror match, because when you're running things like super goof, go the distance, it might hurt a little in the mirror match, but those McDuck Manners kind of help make up for it. And then, of course, they're not going to expect something like this either. They might feel like they're Flaversham safe, then you against a Maui Half Shark, and then you hit them with a poisoned apple. And we saw it when Vince was able to take out a mirror match in top 4 to go on to finals and win finals against Purple Steel. So just a really cool, spicy list that Vince did really well with that spice. So we'll see if he can get the back 3 back in the next set champs. Next up, we have Kirsten running some Diggy Hole, and this is more reminiscent of the Kurt Spice list at NA Continentals. And ROV, I believe, is Rules of Villainy. But anyways, the list itself, so I talk about Kurt Spice, and what that is he was running Rapunzel's Tower and 3 Chin Pos. So with this list, she's opted to go 2 Chin Pos and 3 Plutos. And it's just really cool because Rapunzel's Tower really helps the steel matchups, which aggro normally, really suffers into. So you can play that. Now you have a 3/5 Calhoun. You have a Mr. Smee that, he's a 3/3 plus 3. So if he turns sideways, he only takes 1 damage off of 6 health. So where you've opted to cut some of your captains, it's not really that big of a deal if you can get the Smee onto the Rapunzel's Tower, because now it just opens up damage for Smee to be able to Rapunzel heal. So that's one of the awesome things about Rapunzel's Tower, is that you get so many options to almost guarantee your Rapunzel heals. And if you can get a Rapunzel heal with these Diggy Hole decks, then you're almost guaranteed the win, because that's where you really see these decks losing, is if they start running out of cards. You never give them a Rapunzel heal, and they never see a dock. So it's just really sexy. You have this Pluto, if you put it on there, it becomes a 5/8 or a 1/8, which is really hard to deal with. Chinpo, that becomes a 4/10. I mean, even a Lilo that you bring back, and your Lilo becomes a 1/5. Like, a Fox can't even banish a Lilo, which is really sexy. The other thing to keep in mind is that having a second location that's really cheap, only costing 1 to move, if you move a Happy to, the mine, in the next turn, you can move the Happy to the Rapunzel's Tower and then move the Happy back to the mine to deal another 2 damage. So they might not be expecting that. They may think that they're safe, and then you play a mine, and then you move the mine, like the Happy, back and forth. And so for 4 ink that turn, or 5, so 2 for the Rapunzel's Tower, 1 to move the Happy over to the Rapunzel's Tower, and 2 to move it back, you can deal 2 damage again, which could be the difference between, winning or losing. So just some really sexy plays you can do by adding in that Rapunzel's Tower. And it's inkable, so you just ink it against red, and you move on with your day. So really good list, spicy, I love it, and really good job representing Amber Steel. Next up on the list, we have Greg, and Greg's list is pretty cool because it's Blurple. It's very different than the list I talked about yesterday in my video JD, but why I really wanted to highlight this list is because of why he played it. And he was going to play Amber Steel, I believe Diggy Hole, and his daughter, I think, said, "Dad, I don't want you to play Rapunzel, I want you to play Elsa." So he switched it up, he brought out some Blurple, put it together that day or the night before, and said, "All right, I'm going to take this for you." Where would we be without our ladies, right? But this list is super cool, and what it is you're just trying to spam the board with these characters. And looking at these characters, your quest 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, goats essentially 2, like 3. So a lot of these characters that are harder to banish, like 2/6, 3/6, 5/5, and they're questing for 2 and have really good effects too, other than a vanilla Scrooge McDuck. But so what you can do is you can play a 1-drop, you can ramp on 2, and then on 3 you play a 5/5/2. And then on 4, you can trade with something if you wanted to, and then you play a Baymax to heal that damage, to gain the lore anyways, and you trade it into something. Or you can ramp on turn 2, And then turn 3, you play like a Genie or a Scrooge McDuck. And then on turn 4, you play Donald Duck. And then on turn 5, you can already play Hades. So you can go into this crazy turn where they play something, they're feeling really good. You put it in their inkwell, and now you have a 3/6/2 on board. And that feels really good. Of course, you're still running McDuck Manners to really punish the Be Prepared. 9 health is not an easy thing to handle. The Let It Go just for another Hades essentially, but it's inkable. So it's just a really cool like tempo list of where you're dealing with less with resource management and more with just spamming these characters down and really trying to beat up players before things get going. So really good job, man, bringing something different, playing a cool card like Baymax that we love to see, the vanilla Scrooge McDuck. Really like and really happy that you were able to get that first place. So huge shout out to your daughter. Next up on our list, we have Ben Hutchison, and this one is a really cool story because this was his first set champs. I believe he just started this set and finally picked it up, ran with Hyper Aggro, and got the perfect lineups. Couldn't have asked for anything better and able to take first place. So good job, man. This is just, it's Hyper Aggro without the Amethyst Chromicons and, the one Sorcerer's Spellbook that, I bet he saw against every red-purple player. And I love the locations down here. We see 2 fairy ships, 1 library, 1 castle. Whether that's, he didn't have the other locations or he just really liked this spread for the different things they do, I don't know. But I love the oddity there. I love that 3 Tianas coming in. I think Tiana's such a cool card because she's so difficult to deal with. And because a lot of the time these red purples, they see the piglet on the draw, so they're like, okay, I have to brawl that. And then now they don't have a brawl for Tiana. And what do they do at that point? It just becomes annoying. They can handle it. It's just difficult. And when you run 4, 8, 12 bodyguards, it's almost impossible to deal with a Tiana without an action that just removes her outright. And then of course you have all of this reach. You have White Rose, Goat, Gathering Knowledge, and Bosses on a Roll for just an insane amount of reach on top of the Sorcerer's Spellbook. So this list, maybe he already knew his local meta was just all red purples, but this list is ready to just decimate red purple. And he did. He really did. So good job, man. I'm really happy that you were able to take home that first place finish and really just have your first set champs be a total success. That's really awesome to see. Really good job. Next up, we have this gentleman. I'm not even going to... Dinel, maybe. I probably way off, but good job taking this Diggy whole list. This is very reminiscent of DeCandio's list. It looks like, he just replaced a Gantu with a Kita, but ultimately just doing what Diggy Hole wants to do. It plays a bunch of characters, a turn 1 into a turn 2, into turn 3 being a 2-drop and a 1-drop, and then turn 4, maybe you're already at that point where you're using Dock. It's just doing what Diggy Hole does, which is just be a force to be reckoned with. And the matchup spread is really impressive too, because a lot of steal that you see in this matchup spread. Really jealous of the best of 2. I wish our local meta was best of 2, but it's not. But Diggy Hole just showing that this is a strong core set of cards, that the Cindy on 1 or Daisy on 1, both incredibly powerful turn 1s into a Piglet or a Calhoun on turn 2, or a Smee into a Pete on turn 3, and then on your turn 4, you're singing Strength of a Raging Fire with Pete, it just does ridiculously strong things, and we continue to see Diggy Hole really win games just before the opponent can even get things going. So really good showing, man. I'm glad you're able to take first and have a good time. Next up, we have Noah Lane with Green Steel, and this is really reminiscent of Zan's list from the NA Continentals that he got his, essentially a second Worlds invite with, but I've got to say, I really like where Green Steel is going, that Zan introduced at Continentals. Green Steel was something a lot of people really don't like discard, myself included, but at the same time, my biggest issue with Green Steel was always how long the games take. You're playing till 20, 30 turns, gaining maybe 1 lore by turn 10, and they just take so long, and it's so boring to me. But now we're seeing that where your discard package takes a little bit to get going. You're running this aggro line, and sometimes you can just win before you even get your discards going. This Cursed Merfolk into maybe a Honey to get that 2 lore, a Calhoun to protect yourself, or Ursula to take a song. But what's really spicy about this list and that I really like is you can go turn 1, something like a Diablo, and then turn 2, you can shift Diablo, get that down, and then you can play a Kita, a readied Kita, not an exerted one. So now you have this Diablo drawing you cards, you have a bodyguard down that's not exerted yet, but turn 3, you play the 3-drop Ursula. And what's super exciting about this is turn 4, you can play Prince John or the Muses. You can quest with Kita so she gets bodyguard, and then sing with the 3-drop Ursula. And now a lot of the time, one of the weaker parts of Ursula is that she has to sing the song to get the ability. So your opponent knows that they can then take out the 3-drop Ursula once they sing. But if you have a bodyguard on the field, now it becomes really difficult for them to be able to take out your 3-drop Ursula. You could play a bodyguard just to protect your Diablo. Maybe they play a genie on turn 4. You play a Kita in bodyguard, and now it's really difficult for them to take out your Diablo. So you draw even more cards. Or maybe you just play Kita so you can quest with a whole bunch of your characters that quest like Prince John to quest for 2, or Smeeze to quest for 2. Whatever it may be, maybe Ursula is just singing I'm Still Here to turn your Kita into a 2/3 resist +4, and you draw 2 cards. And now your Ursula's protected, and hopefully in those 2 cards you see one of these, this sudden chill, or one of these songs right here. So I really like this list. I think it's really clever to throw in the Kita, that bodyguard right there. But again, I really like where Green Steel's going with this kind of, I'm going to aggro and then I'm going to control later on. I think it's really cool. So good job, Noah. I like, as much as I hate to say it, I like to see it. So really good job. Next up on our list, we have a name that I'm probably going to butcher. We'll call her, I think, Keres Rodriguez, taking first place with a traditional steel song. And this is a little bit more of a spicy steel song list. We have 19 songs, which is a little bit more than we normally see. But in those 19, we see Grab Your Swords and I Find 'Em, Flatten 'Em. Grab Your Swords is one that we just don't see very often anymore because 2 damage just isn't enough to really do much anymore. Looking at this board right here, it clears a Cindy, and clears a Robin Hood. That's really it. And that feels pretty bad. So you just don't see it a lot because it's uninkable, and it's a really, 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 really bad uninkable against our hardest matchup. So we already have a hard time into red-blue, and now you're going to have even a harder time against red-blue. But when you don't see any red-blues, it really doesn't matter that you have bad cards into that deck. Now, I Find 'Em, Flatten 'Em is another highly debated card because by the time you can play it, they've either used all their items like they wanted, or they just don't have that many items down. And Ursula is not really something you want to see against, a lot of these decks that run a lot of items because she only quests for 1. So I Find 'Em, Flatten 'Em is a highly debated song as well. But again, it worked. It's inkable at least, so that's all that matters, because if you don't need it, you can just ink it. Now, the other interesting thing is we're running 4 heavy characters. We're running 2 Aerial Sonic Warriors and 2 Big Cindies. And this is really exciting because typically you don't see both of them. So if they see you ink an Aerial, they might think you don't have any Big Cindies. Or if they see you ink a Big Cindy, they might not think you have Aerials, and they probably think that you don't have a second Big Cindy. So a lot of surprise factor running 2 of each. Now, she did say that in this steel song match right here, the semifinals, the fact that she had Aerial and not their opponent was the big reason that they won that game. On top of being on the play was really impactful as well. So I really like this list. 10 1-drops I think is a really good number. I really like the 10 option because you really want to see one to set up the Strength of a Raging Fire turn. And the Robin Hood shift line, really cool to see that as well. And of course the Naveen. So really good job representing traditional steel song, and congratulations on your champion, Matt. Next up, we have John Johnson bringing in some red-purple burn. And this is a deck that we haven't seen or heard much of since I believe it was Seattle. Yeah, I believe it was Seattle when I think it was Warp and his team all went in with this deck. And it's one of those decks that is highly dependent on the local meta. And because when they all ran into Seattle with this deck, only one of them made it to day two with this deck because they saw all the right matchups. So with this, I don't know what his matchups were. Maybe he did see all the right matchups. Or maybe he just outplayed all his opponents and it didn't matter. But I love this list because the Moana into Flynn almost always guarantees 3 lore, which is super powerful. We have the Robin Hood to be able to dig for all these extra actions and, play pulls a Dragonfire. Like, you're not upset about seeing really any of these cards. Brawl, maybe, depending on what part of the game it's at, but the rest of these, you're not generally feeling too bad. I love the Winnie the Pooh, the 552, just a vanilla. It's like Scrooge McDuck, but it's inkable and costs 1 more. But he said he ran this just because he loves Winnie the Pooh. So I love that you went into set champs with the goal of having fun. And winning is just part of it, right? And so you went in, you had fun, you played one of your favorite cards, and then you still won. And that is really awesome. So I love this list. I love this burn aspect. I love that you played a deck to just beat up red blue because they deserve to get a little bit of a beat down. And I just love that you showed that it can be a really great deck and it can do good things. So really good showing, man. Really, really good job, John. And congratulations on that, Matt. Next up, we have a second traditional steel song list and the only other one I have in the video. And this one is a bit different because, well, it's very different. When we look at it, there's no Sonic Warriors. He opted to just go with the big Cinderellas, but he also opted to go with the Bare Necessities. And the Bare Necessities it's another debated topic because normally you either run Bare Necessities or World's Greatest Criminal Mind, and most people have opted to cut the Bare Necessities completely and only run World's Greatest Criminal Mind because of the red-blue matchup with Maui Half Shark. And World's Greatest Criminal Mind is just a really easy way to answer that threat. Now, in this case, the crazy thing is, though, and this is what makes it such a debate, is that World's Greatest Criminal Mind and Bare Necessities are equally good into all the same matchups, really. Red purple, red blue, steel song. So it's really just your preferred play style. Bare Necessities will most likely see more play than World's Greatest Criminal Mind ever does. And maybe that's why he opted to play it here. But I love that we see the 2-2 with the Lilos and the Piglets. I really like seeing captains in Steel Song to help with the Smees. Because that 1 damage they lose is often a really big deal. You do lose the Rapunzel heal, but it makes it harder for your opponent to take them out. I've really come to love Gaston and Naveen in my traditional Steel Song lists because oftentimes we win because we wheel. So if we don't have an aerial, if we don't have the shift line, then we end up having to hard cast it. Whereas if we have Naveen or Gaston, it gives us more options to be able to get the wheel. We can keep them in our opening hand, and then we just win because we sing with wheel and then we flood the board. So I've really come to like these, and it's awesome to see you playing them. But really good job taking that first place finish. Way to represent. Next up, we have Michael Sav, and this one's called Test for DLC, so I'm curious if he's going to the Australian DLC. If you are, best of luck, man. One thing that I will say is that I think you're going to have some pretty good luck. Look at these matchups with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Amber Steel lists. He had 5 Amber Steel lists that he beat, and that's arguably the hardest matchup for Red Purple. Amber Steel it's a preferred, it has a good win rate into red purple, so to beat 5 of them is really impressive. Now I don't know if you were on the draw or on the play for them, all right, okay, so you beat 4 of them. You lost once to Diggy Diggy Hole, but still beating 4 of them, beating a Diggy Diggy Hole in finals, really impressive work. And looking at this list, it is a bit unique because of the uninkable count. When we look at the uninkables here, we have 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we have 16 uninkables, which it is high. And when the issue with that is that a lot of the control that makes the deck so good is all these uninkables. So you want them, but you can't afford to keep them. And it can get really dangerous when you have so many high cost uninkables. So I'm curious if any of these losses, or even when he won, if it was one of those things that he ran into of like, man, I hope my next card please be an inkable, otherwise I am dead in the water. Now, one thing to note though is that he is running 3 crabs. So if he does get stuck on ink, he still has 3 crabs to be able to control the board. And you don't normally see a lot of crabs in red purple anymore. But he's also only on 2 goats. So he does lose a lot of that red blue ability there. And again though, if we look over here, he had no red blue matchups. So didn't really matter that much. So that's one thing I'd think about is at the DLC, regardless of what your local meta, I don't know if you're in Australia or not, but regardless of what the local meta looks like in Australia, there's going to be red blue that shows up. It's the best deck in the format for a reason, because it's so good, and goats and rabbits are some of the best cards into that matchup. So I'd be interested to see if you go up to 4. But how did testing go? It clearly went good. Are you changing anything? Let us know in the comments. But I like the list, man. Just doing nasty red-purple control things with this huge red lineup right here. And then libraries to just draw even more cards. So really good showing. Good job. Next up, I believe this is our last Amber Steel. No, there's a Steel Fossa list coming up. So we got Vini just running some Diggy hole again. Now, we've already talked about it a lot. This time we do have matchups though, and one thing I did want to highlight is the Baja Blast that he found in finals. Good job to you. I'd love to see the list that you ended up running, but for you, Vini, just a good job. You know, Diggy hole is not the easiest deck to pilot, so you piloting it to victory is, you know, worthy of a shout out. And just doing Diggy stuff, right? Playing these 1-drops, playing these 2-drops, going wide, questing for 2, winning the game before they get to their power turns. So really good job, really good showing too of, you know, playing 2 Amber Steels, ID with teammate 2-0. So was it an ID or did your teammate just give it to you? I'm curious, but doesn't matter. Good job, man. Way to represent the Diggy hole lifestyle. Next up, we have Humble, and this one's super exciting because unless you live under a rock, Humble is the Ruby Fossa guy. He's been playing Ruby Fossa for as long as I've seen him around in the 20 Lord Discord. So he took Ruby Fossa to his first set champs and took a 2nd place finish. And I will say he has updated this list a little bit. I believe he's cut the Peter Pans for some other options, but check out the 20 Lord Discord. But looking at this list, it's really awesome. We see the Lumieres coming back because the Lumiere is just so good into the red-blue that is really heavy in the meta right now, but also it just allows a lot of good trading opportunities, you know, making it so you can quest freely, but then they have to trade most characters into it. You know, a Fox, if you play Lumiere on 2 and then Gaston on 3, now they can't brawl your Gaston, and that is massive. Like, the fact that your Gaston can't be brawled is so big. They have to now use 2 ice blocks to use a baby Sisu on it. On turn 4, when you exert him, they can't just trade a Fox into it and the Fox lives. The Fox now gets banished as well. So one thing to keep in mind, if you pick up this list, Lumiere is like a Flynn Rider. You play him and you never, ever, ever turn him sideways unless it's like you're at that point where you need to win. So really awesome to see that in here. The Moana just coming in, being a 3-2-1. It's an annoying card that quests for 1 to trades into most anything. But there's that opportunity where, all right, I have a Piglet in hand. They turned their muses sideways, right? Because they needed to sing a song. So then you play Piglet and you can banish their muses if you have a Lumiere down. Like, so cool turns like that where you could just surprise them by playing a captain. And then of course we see the Pongo. Humble's really been high on the Pongo because this deck normally loses because it doesn't see card draw. So Pongo comes in and says, okay, no Rapunzel heals. That's fine because now I can use this. My whole deck is characters, so I'm guaranteed card draw. And then Judy Hopps just helping with that. Mufasa helping with that. You don't get to draw a card, but it replaces itself. And when you look at this list, a lot of these are really good flips off the top. I mean, imagine flipping a 5/5/4. Like, that feels pretty good. So the other really spicy thing about this is Gaston and Raya. And what's really cool about this is you can play Gaston on 3, Raya on 4, and then on turn 5, you can turn Gaston sideways, ink a card to ready Gaston, and then turn Gaston sideways again to reduce your next character by 4. So if you have 5 ink on because you just inked, and you reduce a character by 4, you can play any character in your deck, and that is crazy strong. Imagine playing a Maleficent on turn 5. Imagine playing a big Sisu on turn 5 to wipe their whole board. Getting a 4/8/2 or a 5/5/4 on turn 5. That's strong. Like, that is a lot of opportunity. The other thing you can do is you have 5 ink, so you can just play like a Pongo for free and then play a Sisu. Or you can play so you're on 4 ink, you play a Mother Gothel, and then you do the Raya combo. So you play a Rapunzel for free on Mother Gothel, so you can draw 3 cards. So Raya is just so powerful. It's not so powerful that you want to see a whole bunch. That's why we only see 2. But the combo with Gaston is insane. So really cool here. We look at the matchups, and he beat a lot of the decks that this might normally suffer into, being aggro, green purple. I'm assuming this was probably hyper aggro and another green purple. So just a really good showing. And the last thing I want to mention with this list is Humble did just finish his guide. I believe it's $10 on MetaFi. I'll put the link in the description, but I've heard really good things about it. I haven't seen it yet, but soon I'll get it. But I've heard really good things about it. I'd say check it out. He goes through a bunch of the matchups and what you want to see and what you want to do. And yeah, $10, help him out. A guy that's been playing Ruby Fasa regardless of what people think about it. So really good at showing, man. Next up on our list, we have Cayden Wood with a Steel Fasa list. And what's really cool about this list is that look at the flips off of Mufasa. The only thing that you're really upset about seeing would probably be Piglet and Doc. And the reason I say that is because, both Docs. The reason I say that is because they're so easy to banish. Like, if they live, sure, it's great. Maybe Cindy, but the rest of these, like, look at this bottom here, where if you flip those, how happy are you going to be to see a Perdita, a Cindy, a Chinpo? Like, that is awesome. I loathe seeing Zeus in these Steel Fasa lists because of Mufasa, because now you have 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 really bad flips off of Mufasa. And so that feels bad, but at the same time, like, it probably did a lot of work. It answers Genie, it answers, a Scrooge McDuck and a Tinkerbell, whatever it may be. So we see it a lot. I'm not a fan, but it's working, and I don't play Steel Fasa, so who am I to judge? So really good job, man. I love seeing Mufasa just doing work and beating up the local meta. Looking at these, 2 IDs into that red-blue, which had to feel really good. Beating a Steel Song, a Hyper Aggro, which is probably a harder matchup for this list, unless you see the Cindy on 1. So, and then beating a discard deck, which is always difficult for a Mufasa list because your draw options are so limited. So really good job, Cayden. All right, next up we have a buddy of mine. He played at Portals in Easton on Saturday, I believe, and he took second playing Purple Steel for the very first time. He was texting me and he's like, I really like what it looks like. I haven't played it yet. I'm going to play it. And he went and he kicked butt. He took second place at a 20-ish person event, and he went the really hyper aggro route with the 4 Maleficents. You got to respect it. One thing that 3 docs is kind of interesting. I wonder if 1 Maleficent could be a doc to really guarantee you see that draw power, but just doing Purple Steel stuff. You've got all these 1-drops. You've got the Fire of the Cannons to answer baby Cindy's, and then so you got the Strength of a Raging Fire to use off of Pete on turn 3 or turn 4, I guess. 2 Zeus's. So just an effective list that he was able to take, pilot really well because he's a really good purple player. He normally plays red purple, but just wanted to switch it up. And he did really well, only losing to a red blue in finals. And against a gentleman that's played red blue since he started playing the game back in like set 2 or 3 or whatever. So for good job, man. Really impressed. Really proud of you. Can't wait to see you on, well, Saturday or Sunday, whatever it is. So really, really good showing. Congratulations on the mat. Next up, we have Harland Sweet's list. And I don't know if he did a set champs this past weekend or won a mat, but he did win one at the content creators. So he has won a mat with this list, but I mostly put this list on here for all of the people that ran this exact list and went and won themselves a mat. And there was a lot of them. They were tagging him on Twitter saying thank you. And so really good showing to him and Jax. And this list is just what it is, the true definition of tempo. You play a Mickey on 1, maybe a Calhoun on 2 to trade into stuff, or a Smee, Alice on 3, Pluto on 4, Cogsworth on 5, and then what's your opponent going to do? Especially if you play Alice on 3, Pluto on 4, and Bodyguard, you quest with Alice and then give ward to Pluto. Well, I mean, how many opponents can actually deal with a warded 5/5? Like that's pretty powerful. But that's not your only line. You have, the Robin Hood shift line. You have all of these other cards here to be able to handle pretty much anything your opponent wants to do. You have refill with the Beast, and you have like the Dock. So it's just a really strong package that has multiple different lines for you to take and to get to victory. It does have a little bit of a harder time into the red matchups. B-Prep really handles the board really well. You have no disruption, and if your board gets handled, your draw package isn't very strong. Like Doc's great, but if you use Doc and get 2 Gantus back, that doesn't feel good. Like you're not doing a lot with that, especially if they can answer them really well. And you also can only play 1 at a time. So it's one of those decks that you go all in, you're trying to get there and get there before those red decks can use B-Prep. Now, I will say that Harland has a lot of videos on this very specific deck, and he talks about, so you go to his channel, he has like a matchup of, this deck versus green steel. Here's 20 minutes on what lines you want to take and how you can beat it. So definitely check out his channel, okay? He is a blue steel through and through. As much as he tries to change sometimes, he is always on it. So really good job to Harland for sharing, and Jax for sharing this with everybody, helping people get better with it. And good job to everybody that went out and won a playmat with it. Really good showing. Next up, I think the next one is my favorite list of the whole video. But first, this one, we have green purple with Michael and maybe Michael, and rocking some aggro green purple. We see 4, 8, 12, 15 1-drops coming in. We see the Gazelle, helping you handle maybe a Genie or a Diablo, but also just comes down to give your Curse Merfolk evasive. Sir Hiss is an awesome card. It's a 3/1 evasive. Really sets up Go-Go really well because you could hit something for 3, play Go-Go for 3 lore. The kit for just disruption on the enemy's board. We have a Dawn Carnage coming in, a 4/4/2 with evasive. So just a really annoying card for your opponent to deal with because you can't Medusa it, you can't brawl it, and it's questing for 2 the whole time. And then I do love the Ursula. Like it forces your opponent to really respect the 2-drop Ursula, because now at any point at 4 ink, you have to know that an Ursula, a 4/7/3, could come down on the next turn that can exert any of your characters, and you can't sing. So that 1-of is like Steel Song running the 1-of Cindy. It just forces your opponent to respect a card that you might not even have in your hand. So green purple, a lot of love, beating up on red blue. So what's not to love about the deck? But really like it, man. I really like the 1 Dawn. I think that's always a fun tech option to see. 5 is a little expensive. That's why we only see 1 typically, but I really like it. So good showing. In our final list, my favorite list of the whole video is this crazy, wacky princess deck. And first off, it's my favorite because it's all over the place, but it's running my favorite card, which is Queen Sensor Core. And I love this card. I think unfortunately it's unplayable right now because it's at the start of your turn instead of at the end of your turn. But the ability to draw cards off of this item and gain lore is just so awesome. But then we look at the rest of this deck, and it's just all over the place. And I think it's so cool. We see 3, 2, 2, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, 2. Like, you get the point. And we see a bunch of racers. We see a Jasmine that I've never seen this in a deck outside of like a draft event, where when this character quests, you gain one. They lose 1 lore and you gain 2 lore. So that's pretty awesome. Slowing down the aggro decks. We got the Mulan package, Tiana's, which everybody knows how much I love Tiana. And then the Raya just readying other stuff. Maybe you have a Mulan down. You need something, so you quest to give something +2. You ink, ready it. I don't know if it can quest again, actually, but it can't quest for the rest of the turn. So I guess it can only give it twice, but you can just do wild things when you can ready your characters to do other things. And just really like the list. I think it's wacky. I think it's fun. I'm going to show up with this fun deck, and I'm going to see how I do. And I'm just going to have fun like a locals, and then you go and win first place. So really awesome showing, Seahawks. I love to see it. This is my favorite kind of thing to see when it comes to set champs, of people they're just going out and playing the game because they love the game. And what better way than to play a bunch of princesses in my favorite card, Queen Sensor Core. So really good showing. So ladies and gentlemen, that is all the lists I have for this week. Again, if you want your list thrown up here, please just hit me up on my Discord, tag me on Facebook, on 20 lore page, and I'd love to talk about it. Let me know if you want me to shout out your store or your team, and I'm more than happy to do it. So good job, everybody. For those of you that are playing this weekend, best of luck. I hope you have a great time, and ladies and gentlemen, remember, always stay happy and healthy. I'm out.